Hey there, I'm Mr. C, and this is today's lesson where I'm going to show you how to compare basic fractions. This is super important. You want to know why? Yeah, you want to know why. If you ever want to cook anything or use recipes, you're going to have to be able to kind of look at a fraction and know, okay, do I have enough of that ingredient? And do I have enough of that ingredient? Yeah, okay, right. If you understand the relative size of a fraction, you're going to be able to look at items and ingredients and know if you can actually cook. Secondly, what I think is more important, if you can visualize fractions in your head, and you can actually make models for them, right? Representations and start to do things with them. You can add them and subtract them from each other. You can start to multiply them and divide them, which is something your teacher is going to want you to do. Okay? So buckle up, strap in, because here we go. Let's learn it. Now, a fraction is just a piece of something. What? Yeah, go ahead. Say that in your head while I say it out loud. Fraction is just a piece of something. Now, you can cut anything into pieces. You can even cut groups of things into pieces. We're not going to talk about cutting groups into pieces today. We're just going to talk about taking one thing, cutting it into pieces, and making fractions out of it. Okay? One of the easiest things when I'm talking about making fractions, cutting things into pieces, what I always think about is food. And when I think about cutting food into pieces, you know what I always think about? That's right, cake. Cake is one of my favorite things to use when talking about fractions because that's the first thing you do with it. You cut it up, right? You cut it up and share it. Now, what's an important rule about sharing and sharing cake? Let me just throw this at you. Let's say you and your brother were splitting a cake, okay? And your brother tried to cut the cake right here, and he tried to give you this piece over here. Is that cool? Is that cool with you? You like that? No, I didn't think he did. Why? Because they're not the same size. If he was like, oh, I cut the cake in half. No, you didn't. You cut this little piece over here and this big piece over here. That's a super important rule about creating fractions. The pieces have to be the same size. This cake is cut into pieces, but it's not cut into equal fractions. Okay? So let's get rid of that. And I'm going to show you some actual equal fractions that we can cut these cakes into. Let's start with a half, right? If I were cutting this cake in half, this is what I would do. Boop, cut it in half, right? Two equal pieces. Here's one half, here's another half. Two halves, make a whole cake, right? Okay, let's cut this one into thirds. Thirds is a little more difficult when you first start trying to make thirds because you got to do kind of like a smaller piece and then try to make the bigger piece exactly twice the size of the first piece. I'm pretty good at it. You might have to practice thirds for a while. All right, now look. Did I cut this cake into three equal pieces? Yeah, that's pretty close, right? If I were eating a cake with two buddies and we each wanted a piece, there you go. One for you, one for me, one for the other buddy, right? Now let me ask you an easy question. You can see this. You can answer this. If I were to say, hey, would you rather have one half of a pizza, or I mean a cake? Pizzas are also good for fractions. Or would you rather have one third of a cake, okay? One half of a cake or one third of a cake? What would you rather have? No brainer. Look, it's the half. It's bigger. It's larger. It's greater, right? One half. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. I'm going to cut this cake into fourths. I'm going to make 4/4 out of this cake. When I'm making fourths, you can kind of do it like the thirds, but I like to do it this way. I like to cut it in half and then cut the halves in half. So I have four equal pieces, right? They're equal. Four equal pieces makes fourths. All right, here's another no-brainer question. Ready? Here's the no-brainer question of the century. Would you rather have 1/4 of a birthday cake? Or would you rather have one half of a birthday cake? Duh. Mr. C, one half. It's way bigger. You're absolutely right. One half is way bigger. Right? You'd rather have one half because it's bigger. All right, last one I'm going to show you. And I'm going to blow your minds. I'm going to cut this cake into hundredths. What? Mr. C, can you even do that? Yeah, I've practiced it like about 100 times. Okay, I'm going to start by cutting it into tenths this way. Uh-oh, how many pieces do I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, those bottom pieces are a little smaller, but imagine they're perfectly the same size. I'm going to now cut these tenths into 10. 1, 2, I'm going to try to pick up speed here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, I made my last pieces a little too big. Okay, but let's imagine all those are the same size, right? And look at this. Here's a hundredth right here. That's like a mouthful of cake. All right. So here's another tough question for you. Would you rather have a hundredth of a cake right here, or would you rather have a third of a cake right here? Yeah, Mr. C, third of a cake is huge. I don't even know if you could eat a third of a cake, but I know you'd rather have it, right? Just because you're probably a kid and kids think they want tons and tons of cake, and then all they do is eat the frosting off the top. All right, yes, a third is way larger than a hundredth. All right, ready? I'm gonna blow your mind. I'm gonna start showing you what some of these fractions actually look like. Here's a half. 1 in the numerator and a 2 in the denominator, right? One piece here out of 2 altogether. 1 half. Okay. Nothing mind-blowing yet. Here comes 1/3. 1/3. Here comes 1/4. 1/4. And here comes 1/100th. 1/100th. Now look at these numbers. Look at these fractions for a minute. You told me that you would rather have 1/2, right? Right here. You said you'd rather have 1/2 than 1/100th. Wait a second. Look. Kids mess that up all the time. They look at this 100 in the denominator and they go, 100 is a huge number. Yeah, it is. But all that means is that you've cut your cake, or whatever it is you're cutting up into pieces, into 100 pieces, and you only get one of them. That's like a super tiny little piece. But look at 1/2. That means you cut whatever it is you're dealing with, cake in this instance, into 2 pieces, and you get one of those massive pieces. 1/2 is huge. 1/100th is tiny. And that kids' brains get caught up on that because they go, oh man, 100 is big and 2 is small. A lot of times, yeah, but in fractions, not the case. Here's an important rule, and one you have to remember. Write this one down. The bigger, the larger, the greater the denominator, the smaller, the tinier, the less the piece is. Okay, the pieces of that fraction are smaller if the denominator is bigger. The opposite is also true. Okay, if the denominator is small, the smaller the denominator, the less the denominator, right? If we're dealing with a 2, that number's way less than 100, but that means the pieces of the fraction are bigger, are larger, are greater. That's super counterintuitive and something that you really have to think about, okay? Now, one more thing before I let you go, okay? I want to point this out. Let's say that this numerator here, instead of having 1/100th, let's say you had like 90 of them. So instead of eating only one piece of this small birthday cake, you ate like 90 pieces. I'm going to give a rough estimate. Like you ate there was only 10 pieces left at the end. Right? You ate all this cake. Oh my gosh. You would probably be in a food coma, a cake coma. I don't know. I don't know if you'd survive that. But let's say you ate all 90 pieces, right? Okay, well now look. That is actually larger, right? Because you've eaten so many pieces that it changes the size of your fraction. Okay, so the pieces are small, but you're eating a lot of them, or you have a lot of them, or you're talking about a lot of them. Okay, so as the numerator gets larger, it also changes the size of the fraction. You're going to have to play with and practice that. That's something that we're even going to talk about again in further lessons. Okay, for now, let's remember some of the really important things that we learned today. These are the things I want you to repeat and practice and think about when you start doing skills practice. First, fractions are just pieces of things. Okay. You're talking about fractions, you're talking about pieces. Secondly, the size of the pieces must be equal if you're talking about fractions. All right. If you want to cut up a birthday cake and you want to hose your brother by giving him a teeny piece, that's your business. But don't say you're talking about equal fractions, because equal fractions are equal size pieces. Okay. The larger the denominator, the smaller the pieces of the fraction, and the opposite is also true. The smaller or the less the denominator, the greater or the larger the pieces of the fraction. And then finally, the last thing we talked about, The numerator, the number at the top of the fraction, is how many pieces that your fraction has. Okay, so as that gets larger, you're dealing with more of those pieces, which in turn can change the size of your fraction. Okay, you got to practice this. I'm not going to let you off the hook. This is a big lesson. This is massive. This was important, so you need to practice it. I want you to do this. Draw 4 pizzas. All right, any kind of pizza you want. I don't care. I was even talking about pizzas earlier. Draw 4 pizzas. I want you to cut one pizza in half. I want you to cut your second pizza into thirds. Your third pizza, I want you to cut into eighths. Ooh, I didn't show you how to do that. Hopefully you can kind of get it from this lesson. And then the last pizza, I want you to try to cut into hundredths. All right? You're not done there. Then you got to tell me which one of those pieces, if you could have 1/2, 1/3, 1/8, or 1/100th, which piece of pizza you would take and why. Why? I want you to write it down, or I want you to record it, and I want you to turn it into me right here. Okay? All right? Can you do it? Yeah, you can do it. Not only that, we're going to do it again. Next time, we're going to do it with number lines. I'm going to show you not how to do this with cakes, but how to do this on a number line from 0 to 1. I will see you next time for that lesson.